All right, good afternoon, everybody. We welcome you into another edition of the MLB Deeper Dive here on Awesemo, and joined by two strong-minded, willed individuals. We're going to have a lot to say, not only about the world of baseball, but now as I have combined the worlds of both Max and Terry here, and of course you can follow both Max at DFS Max, at Digital B21 for Terry. It's not going to take much to mention a small, subtle movie reference and have this show go completely down. Normally that's golf with Max, Terry, but since you're here, we're just going to combine forces, and I'm going to try and sneak in as many random Dan Hedaya or anybody else I can think of references here just to have that type of reaction. But Max, first and foremost, I think that we all should at least recognize the attempt and right now execution of what Terry is doing here, because you and I have both gone through this, what Terry did yesterday, getting that second shot of the vax and just being upright. Like, I'm surprised this man is even here. Like, did they roll him out like Hannibal, right?
He's a giant among men. I mean,
the team propping me up behind me here.
There is no way to put it any other way. He's just here for the people, you know, provide his commentary, because we couldn't really do this without him. He's our backbone.
Ooh, wow. I don't know about that much, but I appreciate that, guys. Yeah, it's probably going to end up with me just talking a bunch of nonsense and not saying the right thing, but just ignore me if that happens, or correct me. And if I doze off, just, give me a little poke, or just keep going without me. I'll just sit here sleeping. It'll be great.
Look, here's the good news is that if it's movies or baseball, you at least can sleepwalk through that and sound pretty intelligent, right? It's not like we're asking you to break down the stocks or what happened today on Robinhood, right?
That's right. Yeah, I could be like Robert De Niro in Awakenings through this and still say the right thing. So we're all good.
Oh, my goodness. I love it. All right, so we're going to go through positions here. We're going to look at pitchers. We're going to look at stacks before, or I guess in between all of that. But, looking at the slate tonight, it's not full by any means, and we've done that before. We've just rapid fire through stuff. So, Terry, as we've done with Alex and Max on these full, and again, a little bit lesser with 12, if there's anything that doesn't need to be said, then that's fine. We move on. It's okay to redline a player. It's okay to redline a stack. Hell, it's okay to redline an entire game. Max knows, as far as for the purposes of time, that gives us more time to talk movies anyway. So just balance out what you have in front of you by all means. But Terry, let's start here before the second shot succumbs and overtakes you halfway through the show. How do you look at the stack tonight, or the slate tonight? Pardon me.
Yeah, a lot of premium pitching to pay up for. We've got 6 or 7 different starters that I want at least some shares of. So I'm going to be looking for where that leverage is, where we can gain a little bit on the field by rostering some of these starters, which guys can go well together on the DK slate and leave you a little bit of money left to spend for bats, because a lot of them very priced up, very expensive, and we're paying through the nose for them. But there's just a ton of pitching quality on this slate. So really that's the name of the game. And then we do have some stacks, some bats going up against some pretty weak pitchers the other way. So it's an interesting slate. I like this one.
All right, Max, and I stand corrected, 13, not 12. I apologize, but 13 games, just short of that full slate. How are you looking at tonight specifically?
I mean, the Astros are so far and away the top stack of the day in our tool. So I'm just trying to figure out, how do I get the Astros in with 2 of these really, really good pitchers that Terry's mentioned? So for me, that's going to be the puzzle. How can we make the best possible projected lineup with the Astros here and all this pitching wealth?
All right, and as always, we ask you very little, right, to leave us a like, make sure you're subscribing here to the channel, share across all platforms, and take advantage of all of the free premium tools that we have for you today. The NBA main slate ownership projections, MMA fire rankings, and for us here, MLB main slate ownership projections. And that's really part of the general package. It's $29.95 a week. You have access to all of that. You don't need to wait one day a week for your favorite tool to be free. You can just go on Awesemo Plus at $29.95. And if you're a new user of Awesemo Plus Platinum, you can take advantage of this promo code MLB Deeper Dive. That's it, all caps. It's one word. It's the name of the show here. MLB Deeper Dive. It gets you 15% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. We do have streamlined programs for you. The MLB DFS Awesemo Plus MLB Weekly Package is $15.95, but really just to $29.95, you get everything. And we see it all the time, guys. I'm sure we'll see it again today. We saw it earlier this week where people are coming from, as the NBA winds down, other sports, maybe there's an off time in golf. They want to check out what's happening here tonight. We get questions of all, so there's nothing wrong or no such thing as a bad question. You can hit us up in the super chat, the premium Slack as well. Okay, let's begin here and start with the arms. Terry, you mentioned a couple of pitchers of note here. So let's start with where you're looking the highest, trying to slide most likely to, or maybe depending on ownership, there's another option of a P2.
Yeah, so I mean, there are pitchers, like I said, kind of up and down the board here. So what I'm doing is just kind of using the top pitchers tool like I always do and scanning it for what the ownership looks like on each of these guys versus their probability of being one of the top starters on FanDuel or the top 2 on DK, which is, I mean, that thing's worth its weight in gold for making decisions on a slate this size. We've got a few guys who are ace level, who are kind of priced down compared to some of the others. Like Woodruff and DeGrom are priced way, way up on both sites. But you get Kershaw and Blake Snell, both reasonably affordable. You get Charlie Morton in there, pretty nicely affordable. Ohtani, nicely affordable. I like Tyler Mahle and love the matchup for him against the Rockies here. And he's only 8,500 on FanDuel, 79 on DK. He's got a little weather concern. He's got a little narrative going on. He's one of the major spin rate guys who has made dramatic improvements in spin rate over the last couple of years. So if you buy into that narrative, like I was saying, don't do with Garrett Cole the other night, that would probably be a guy I'm going to zero in on. But it's not something I'm sweating. To me, there's just no way to quantify something like that. If I'm going to adjust Tyler Mahle because I think he's been cheating and I think he's gaining additional spin on his pitches, all right, well, do I knock him down by 25%? Do I knock him down off the board completely? I don't think so. And we saw a guy like Cole come out the other day, and he still had a 9 strikeout game. I think he gave up 2 runs. Like, he had a pretty Garrett Cole kind of a game. So I think it's pretty overblown. It is a big thing with guys gaining spin rate in terms of what it does for the pitching across the league. But I think the sticky substance issue is kind of overblown. So I'm not worried about guys as far as that goes tonight. And I'll fire up a lot of shares of Mahle if he's unpopular.
Yeah, I was trying to see where you were going as far as the typical Cole performance, if it was just a good pitcher, or if it was just a guy benefiting from snot and all the other shit he could put on that baseball, right, Max?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Cole, he has such a good fastball.
Yes.
So for him, like, the spin rate thing is a little bit overblown. Of course, it used to help him. Now it doesn't anymore. But Mahle isn't like nearly as much of a power pitcher. So I think for him, the breaking balls are really more important. He already is like, I think this park is not good, is not great for him. And I really don't know, like, his strikeout stuff is really good, but so many of them are looking like his swinging strike rate isn't popping off the charts for me. So even against this really not good Colorado team, if he comes in popular, I don't know if I want to go there, especially with the fact that, like, I really love Kershaw in the spot. Yeah. I think he's going to be under-owned, and this Texas team just swings and misses so much. And I also have noticed, like, they're really good against hard throwers, which Kershaw isn't anymore. So, like, they've actually gotten to guys like Cole this year, but when you put a soft tossing, kind of like a finesse guy against them, they just don't know what to do. All these young guys know is how to swing hard. So I love the spot for Kershaw at 9,800.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, right? And I'll throw it back real quick to you, Max, and then with Terry as well, kind of the same theme here. You're going to pay up for one of these guys, pay up depending on, who you like. So when crunching lineups and stuff is still going to come out for tonight, granted, but from the pitching standpoint, DeGrom right away, Kershaw as well. There's going to be some Scherzer exposure here. Is there a fourth, like, is there somebody that is outside of maybe that group that you are considering strong as either a P1 in DK or your pitcher in FanDuel?
I mean, DeGrom is by far and away the best pitcher in the world. So he doesn't have a great matchup. The Padres don't really strike out 20%, but he's just so much better than everybody else that if for whatever reason he comes in under-owned, that's going to be my A1. And then Kershaw is my A2. And then Ohtani is really, really good at 8,100 against an Arizona team that isn't very good, strikes out a decent amount of time, not too much. But right now we have him projected for 1% ownership. I think that'll change as we rerun things. He should be more popular than that. But he's actually figured out his walk problems. They're letting him go to 100 pitches now. So I think eventually we're going to see Ohtani in the 9Ks. kind of like what we see Kershaw. So I think he's still really, really underpriced.
Yeah, and Terry, Charlie Morton is basically coming up everywhere as the P2 of choice tonight in lineup. So kind of with the question to Max in the backdrop of the one P1 that stands out to you the most, is Morton the guy that you're going to slide in or get him a lot of exposure to as that second pitcher?
I love the matchup, and yeah, for 7,500, I think he's very much in play as your SP2 go-to option on the DK slate. Great matchup going up against the Marlins. They struggle to create runs. Just pulling them up on the board here. They're currently sixth worst in baseball, 25.8% strikeout rates, at 5% below average creating runs in the split. Only 42 home runs is about league average, and they're subpar with a 138 team ISO as an active roster in the split. So it's a good spot for Morton. He's a pitcher that I've had my issues with trusting over time, but he's pitching fairly well. 27.2% strikeout rate, 3.28 xFIP, 1.26 whip, maybe putting a couple extra guys on base. I don't think it hurts him here against this Marlins team, but they've gotten healthy. They've been frisky. It's not a total pushover of an offense when they're entirely together like they are now. We saw them create some runs the other night with some home runs. So I don't necessarily consider Morton safe, but I think for the upside and especially for the price, he is a smash spot for an SP2 on DK.
Yeah, and Max, just pretty much same question. I'm just scrolling. It's taking me a long time to get to a P2 on DK in a fantasy cruncher here to where I even have somebody other than Charlie Morton.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the problem. Like, he's going to be so high owned because everybody loves this park. It suppresses power. So people have been playing, pitchers against the Marlins or Marlins pitchers for the past, 3 or 4 slates with Colorado. So everybody's is going to gravitate here. So, I mean, to Terry's point, whoever's lower owned between Molly and Morton is the one I'm going to play. I think their upside is very similar. One has a better matchup. The other one has a worse matchup. So, I mean, I think in GPPs, you just take whoever's lower owned. I never like Morton as chalk just because he does have a pretty volatile projection. He can walk a bunch of guys. He gives up some power. So he's definitely not safe. So in GPPs, I'm just going to play whichever one is lower owned. And if for whatever reason, Ohtani is going to come in at 5% because he's $600 more, I'm just going to play all of him.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense to pay up. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to jump in on because I was eyeballing that $8,100 price tag as part of that question. That makes a ton of sense to me to pay up. Just take Ohtani, pay a few extra dollars, and grab him against that Arizona team. Arizona this year, middle of the league in strikeout rate against righties, 24.2%, but creating runs 17% worse than average. 136 team ISO, 40 home runs is right about the middle of the league. So not a lot of threat for power, not a lot of threat for extra base hits coming back against them.
And the roof is closed.
Sorry?
So the roof is closed there. So that park plays really, really good for pitching when the roof is closed.
Just real quick on DeGrom. Saw this here. He's got a 9-game streak of allowing no more than 5 hits and 1 or no earned runs allowed. That's the best streak. And that's better than Nolan Ryan, who had 7 in Mets history. So my point of it is, the secret is out. You're not fooling anybody by rostering Jacob deGrom tonight, but does ownership at that, when this is pretty much as close to a sure thing as you'll get across any sport on any slate tonight, does ownership at all play a factor in there, or can you swallow a 70% owned deGrom and roll with that? And I'm being hyperbolic with that number.
Yeah, so for me, I mean, we're talking about the best pitcher on the planet, to steal Max's phrase. That's exactly what he is. You're getting them at heavy ownership on the DK slate, but as your SP1, where you're paying a lot for them, I don't think it really matters that much. I think it's ownership that we can just kind of swallow and look to get different with some bats. That's going to be the crux of it, though. Everybody who's going to be paying up to an extreme for Jake deGrom is going to land on the same value bats, the most highly projected value bats, whichever team that happens to be. So that's where I would start looking for my pivots. If my first click is deGrom, I want my second click to be on the first bat from a lesser owned stack that still has some upside. You have to get different with your bats if you're doing that. On the FanDuel slate, he's only 16.5% owned as of my last update. So wow. I really like that. I feel like he should be higher owned. You're paying $12K for him, but there are ways to make that work given the pricing that FanDuel uses for some of these bats. So I'm all over it on the FanDuel slate. He's actually my second highest projected pitcher behind Brandon Woodruff, who's going up against the Pittsburgh Pirates, who we haven't really touched on that much yet either. So there's just a lot of options, like we started out saying. I even like Blake Snell on the other side of this one.
Yeah, Max, I guess just kind of looking a little bit deeper on the pitchers before we start switching over to the stacks and then individuals. Woodruff, I mean, Snell, they're names that we haven't even got to. Scherzer was kind of briefly glossed over here. Clearly, you have the top ones that we talked about. You mentioned you were high on Kershaw. Are you looking at any exposure to DK lineups where you are working two higher cost guys in and not settling maybe for a lower cost option, even though that would probably be a lesser owned pivot?
Man, it's tough just because the Astros are twice as likely to be the top stack of the day. We just like never see this kind of thing with stacks. Usually they're like, one's 10%, one's 8%.
Yeah.
You kind of play the ownership. But when you see a 15% stack that's that likely to be the top stack of the day, it's hard for me not to like just fit guys in all over the place from them. But they're also expensive. So getting two like 10K guys or one 10K guy or one 11K guy, one 9K guy, and the Astros is going to be really, really difficult. I also don't really see much of a difference between a Scherzer or a Snell or a Woodruff and an Ohtani. Their strikeout rates are very similar. So for GPPs, I just pay down to like an Ohtani or a Mali who have similar strikeout and ceiling projections and, get the 2 or 3K savings I need for hitters. So no, I think the answer to your question is I'm not going to be that likely to play two top priced pitchers today, just because we have really, really good strikeout projections from the 8K and the 7K guys.
Terry, is there?
Yep. Sorry, I was, as Max was going through that, I just kind of pulled up our lineup builder for DraftKings just to see what we could put together if we rostered like a DeGrom Ohtani combo and then went hunting for Astros bats. You can put together a lineup with those two pitchers and then go on the Astros stack, go from Jordan Alvarez down through the bottom. So you're including Stubbs at catcher, but you're getting Yuli Gurriel, Brantley, Tucker, and Jordan Alvarez. And you've still got 3,900 left over for the 3 spots in your lineup. That's pretty good. I think we can make that work. So I'm kind of intrigued by that combination, that specific combination of pitchers. And then considering that we've got Mali and the other guys we talked about at lesser cost than Ohtani, we can make an easy pivot at that SP2 spot and get to some interesting bats. I don't know that there's room necessarily to get to like Alex Bregman instead of the catcher from Houston, but there are ways to put that together that it's going to probably be chalky because everybody's going to be looking at that combo. But there are definitely ways to get to it and make it interesting at least. So I'm intrigued by that on DK.
Max, it sounded like you were going to jump in before I continue to step over you guys. So
yeah, no. I mean,
you think I'd
sure
be able to do this by now, right? Jeez.
Well, what Terry's saying makes a ton of sense. I also think like you would just play whichever pitcher is lower owned out of the 3, 8K, 7K guys that we mentioned. And I think it also makes sense in some lineups to get the 5K Astros hitters and jump down from like an Ohtani to maybe, who did I have here? Like a Skubal.
Okay.
Like a ton of strikeout upside with Skubal. Obviously a really tough matchup with the White Sox, but he's going to be unowned. He's only 6,900. And I mean, everybody stacked against him versus the Yankees, and he showed you the strikeout upside that he possesses against pretty much anyone. So it's just a matter of him getting lucky, not giving up some barrels. So yeah, I like that play. I think that's going to be pretty low owned. And I'm really high on Brady Singer as well today. We'll get to him eventually.
All right. Terry, I'm curious. Last look at the pitchers. Is there a name maybe closer to the bottom that we either haven't mentioned or didn't dive deep enough on that you can throw out, might be a good or a sneaky P2 play? And if it busts up in everybody's face, you could just blame it on the second shot.
I like that. I might have to do that before every show from now on. I think a guy who's interested at 2 guys, actually, kind of in the middle of the board, reasonable prices. The first guy is actually dirt cheap on DK, and that's Anthony DeSclafani going up against Washington. Not the greatest spot in the world, some power threat coming back against him, but certainly some strikeouts there. He's pitched fairly well this year, so for the minimal investment as an SP2, I think he makes sense. And then Savali going up against a fairly weak Seattle lineup. I think you're paying up for him. Like, I would definitely rather pay 8,100 for Ohtani than 8. But the spot, the matchup, and everything makes a little bit of sense. Like, I think it's justifiable to look to him. And then a guy who's not at all in the the space that you described, but a guy who we haven't really mentioned and deserves being mentioned from the top tier is Lucas Giolito going up against the pretty weak Detroit Tigers lineup. He's another guy, ace caliber type pitcher, not necessarily hitting those marks this year so far, but the talent is there, and that Detroit lineup is weak and is loaded with strikeouts. So I think that's another good spot, which is an embarrassment of riches at pitching today.
Now, it is the anniversary of the flu game, so maybe Terry is just inspired. Could that be it?
I mean, that's definitely it.
Right. I mean, who isn't inspired on the anniversary?
I watched some highlights from that game, and Jordan just looked like he was going to die. But I hated Jordan at that time because I'm a Knicks fan. Right. And they had some run-ins, as we all know.
And it's not the flu game, right? We know that it's either the dude was hungover or somebody actually poisoned his pizza. There's no way that he just had the flu and that was it. I'm sorry.
And he went gambling right after, so I don't really feel bad for him.
Exactly. There you
go.
Sure. Now, speaking of anniversaries, it would be, and I figured both of you could have some fun with this really quick as we turn over to the stacks in a second here. It would be today, June 11th. Do you know whose birthday it would be, Terry? Famous actor who has passed away recently.
Ooh.
And, recently, in the last decade. Gene Wilder.
Oh, no kidding. Love Gene Wilder.
One of the all-time comedic actors, and I mean comedic actors as far as it's hard to have range in comedy, right? Where you can stay in the comedic genre but have range. Gene Wilder is one of the all-timers, man.
Absolutely. And he could play the straight man or he could play the cut up. Like he could go either way you needed him to. Absolute professional. Partnership with Mel Brooks through a lot of his career. So we're talking Blazing Saddles. We're talking Young Frankenstein. Made See No Evil, Hear No Evil with Richard Pryor. Just a ton of good flicks in his catalog. Love Gene Wilder.
You have a go-to
one from Blazing Saddles where he's steady as a rock. Yeah, but I shoot with this hand.
Yeah, he was in. I mean, a lot of people will remember Wonka, right? More so than I think, like the younger crew. I don't know where you stand, Max. If you're more of a Wonka guy, or if you're back with like Silver Streak. See No Evil, Hear No Evil was actually a really funny movie.
Yes,
absolutely, really funny movie.
I'm a Mel Brooks guy, so for me, it's Blazing Saddles all the way.
Yeah,
man, that opens up a whole different conversation.
You could
about
not
Mel
make
Brooks,
that movie
today.
today.
No. But there's a lot of Mel Brooks I don't think you could get away with, right? Look, he was also, remember that famous scene in Young Frankenstein, right? Where it's he's got him out there and they're doing the Broadway. I forget the song.
Putting on the Ritz.
Putting on the Ritz.
Yes.
Putting on the Ritz. Absolutely. All right. The show today brought to you by No House Advantage. We're going to tell you all about NHA coming up in a couple of minutes. The amazing way in which you can win money off of player props that are locked in as opposed to the book. But let's look at the stacks real quick. And I got a little other thing I might slide in here regarding Wilder or beyond under that umbrella. But Max, I mean, you've mentioned it a couple of times, and all you need to do out there collectively, is go to our DFS top stack tool today for MLB, the Awesemo Plus package at $29.95. So you don't need to wait one day a week to get something like this. And as Max has told you, Houston right now has a commanding lead. 15% top stack versus everybody else, the Angels at 8 and then below. So is it just a chalk night for you? You have to have a plan B here, right, Max, as far as to get around ownership?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to be that owned. Like, we have them projected at 15%. Obviously we have the best tools in the industry. So the people that follow us are going to know that this is the top projected stack. But other sites might have some other opinions, So I don't think they're going to be like 40% chalk on a 13-game slate. So I don't think you're going to need to avoid them much. Obviously, there'll be hitters that are more, chalky than others, like Tucker's underpriced, Brantley's underpriced. So they'll be chalkier, but I don't think you're going to need to avoid them that much. But my other go-to stack today is the Blue Jays. They're expensive, but they're in such a good spot versus Richards. He's actually like a reverse splits guy, gives up more hard contact, more walks, less strikeouts to righties. And they just have so much power facing that monster, the green monster here in Fenway. I love that game as a whole for offenses. I think it's going to be back and forth. It's not as warm as it was in the last couple of days in Boston, but it's still like 70% humidity. So I think it's a great weather game. I think the pitching is awful. So I think this game's going to go off. So I love the Blue Jays here, and they're going to be like 4% owned just because they're all expensive.
All right, two parts, right, Terry? How do you approach Houston? And then similar to Max, where is your number one pivot for the Houston stack?
Yeah, so I'm with everything that Max said about Houston. Love the spot. Love that they're projecting that high for the probability of success. And like he said earlier, it's not something we see all the time. With this many games, 26 teams to choose from, usually those top stack numbers are within a percentage point or two from one another as you scan down the entire tool. So to have one team get out that far and then be under-owned on top of it on this size slate, that's a big, big flashing play me sign. So I'm going to have a ton of Astros. And there are ways to roster this team without too much weight in terms of who people are putting together. I love Jordan Alvarez. I think he's one of the best hitters in the entire league and one of the best power bats in the entire league right now. But if you skip him, everyone else in this lineup is under like 15% ownership. So you've got room to work here. A guy like Yuli Gurriel, I mentioned him in my write-up when I wrote about this team yesterday, and he homered and came through with yet another nice game. Dude's hitting 335, 407, 545 with 9 home runs. He creates runs 66% better than average and has a 211 ISO on the season. And people just leave him on the side like he's garbage, like he's not a good player. He's under 5% owned on both sites. Get Yuli Gurriel in your lineups. Get to some of the lower owned bats and put them together in creative ways. But up top, you get plenty of ownership around, or plenty of room to work around Altuve, Correa, Bregman. So there are good combinations to put together in that Astros team. And then as for another team, I wrote about the Cincinnati Reds backing up Molly going up against Kyle Freeland, who I don't think much of as a pitcher. I think it's a great spot, kind of similar to what Max was saying about the Red Sox pitcher. Freeland is just basically washed at this point. 11.1% strikeout rate over a monstrous 13-inning sample this season. Not really fair to call that out on him, but he's walked 12% of hitters, 6.26 xFIP in that sample, 2.08 whip is just god-awful. So he's a targetable guy. You get Jesse Winker in there, who loses a lot of quality lefty-lefty in terms of his ability, but the dude's leading the league in most of the offensive categories. He's having a monster season. Not all lefties created equal, and if you can get to Jesse Winker at under 2% ownership on both sites for the money, I don't care about the lefty-lefty. I think they're going to chase Freeland quickly enough, and he can get to a lefty like this. So I'm fine with rostering Winker and getting a ton of ownership offset there. And then there are great bats up and down this lineup. It's, they're missing like Mike Moustakas still, but you can get the Nick Castellanos, who's crushing the ball. You can get the Eugenio Suarez. You can get the Joey Votto, who's returned to this lineup. Votto's numbers aren't really there in terms of what we expect from Votto in the hit tool and the on base, only 217, 308 so far, but 209 ISO, excellent, 6 home runs in his 130 plate appearances. So Votto's fine. A lot of room to work with that red stack as well.
All right, Terry, just one stack to keep in mind, get your thoughts on it. Then I have another one for you, Max, real quick. You mentioned actually that game from a pitching standpoint. So seeing if you might be able to take advantage of it from the stack standpoint. And Terry, as far as this team is concerned, look, the top stack percentage for Seattle is super low. The ownership percentage, however, starts to creep up a little bit, around projected 7% here on DraftKings. But the value alongside the Angels and the Twins, double digits, versus everybody else. So clearly, at least on our stack tools, there is something in the algorithm that would tell you that there's value on Seattle at the very least. I don't know if it's worth the risk, though, in your regard. Yeah,
so to me, I don't think Savale is some kind of great pitcher. He's only striking out 18% of hitters so far this season, 1.08 whip, 4.19 xFIP. He's fine. It's just he was going up against a team that I consider relatively weak. They're getting all that value from the salaries, right? You've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hitters in the projected lineup under 3,500 on the DK slate. Bunch of guys in the low 3,000s to mid 2,000s on the FanDuel slate. So this is a team where I think we're going to get a lot of people focusing on them when they're trying to find that value stack, when they put DeGrom and let's say Kershaw into a lineup on DK, looking for value. I think a lot of people land there. And since I don't think very much of the lineup overall, I think it might be a spot where I'd be willing to look in other directions if I'm looking for some cheap, low-owned stacks. I think the ownership becomes a more important part of that than the value number. So they're getting over-owned for their probability of being the top stack. So I would look around to some of these other, scan by value and then look toward that leverage mark. It's not great, but I would greatly prefer the Angels, who have a similar 12.8 value mark on the DK slate and rank second overall on the board in terms of probability of success, and are going less over-owned. So it's a team that's still negatively leveraged, but it's just a higher quality lineup, and I think you can do more with it. And then I would kind of focus on some of these high-end stacks. Like Max mentioned Toronto. They're one of the top-ranked stacks. They've got positive leverage on the DK slate, and they're in like the middle of the value. So I think you could probably land on Toronto and find a few cheap bets within that lineup to put together with like a 5-man. If you're grabbing 3 Blue Jays, I'm pretty confident you could do it at value and lack of ownership. So that's the way I would look at that.
Max, what are your thoughts? Similar question and scenario here with a team like Detroit, not clearly as high of the value, like 4 points less when it comes to the value percent, but even lower on the likelihood of them being the top stack, yet still just under 9 as far as the value percent there. Not owned, not projected to do anything good at all, except there's that value right there in the middle.
Yeah, Giolito's just too good. Like I get Savali is not. So that's why I get the Seattle thing more. Plus, like, you know, Detroit and Seattle are very similar teams where they have a bunch of really young hitters that are going to be good eventually, but right now they just swing and miss too much. And like Texas is in that kind of a spot as well. They have a bunch of power all throughout the lineup. So with guys like that, I like to target pitchers that don't strike them out much. So pitchers like Savali don't have swing and miss stuff. Giolito has maybe one of the best swing and miss arsenals in baseball. So against him, I just never played Detroit. Like I would never play Detroit in this spot. Yeah, I mean, also like the park isn't great for power, and the White Sox bullpen's pretty good. So for me, it would always be Mariners here. And like I kind of like the Brewers. We should talk about them a little bit. Chase DeYoung, I think it's DeYoung. He's not very good. Gives up a ton of power. The park's pretty good for power, 80% humidity here. And the way Brewers have constructed their lineup lately, I really dig it. It's just like tons of strikeouts, but also tons of power. So I like Narvaez, Vogelbach, Garcia, Adames. Like they got Willie Adames from Tampa. All these guys do is swing for the fences. That's what I want in my stack. So I really like the spot here for the Brewers. They would probably one of the cheaper stacks that I like here.
All right, we'll look now individually, start with behind the plate, kind of move around, especially with the backdrop of stacks. And already, as Terry and Max broke down pitchers and kind of how to approach not only who you are rostering tonight on the mound, but who to avoid, like who they're going up against. As promised, though, no house advantage, everything, NBA, MLB, PGA going on now. Wait until football season picks back up, all for cash prizes. It's all exclusive peer-to-peer, and you're essentially beating the books. You've got over 500 player props. We do this all the time on the tip-off. Every time we go there and give you these individual props, and then I pull up the book here in PA, and I show you how in the morning there was a belief that Mike Conley could play. So somebody's numbers were ridiculously low because it would show you that belief that Conley would suck minutes away from him. Well, guess what? Mike Conley gets ruled out, and all of a sudden, everything changes on the books. You know what it doesn't change? No house advantage. You're locked in throughout the day. You don't have to worry about losing value. Awesemo is the promo code. You'll match your first deposit, $20. With that, again, Awesemo, beat your friends, not the house. Download the in-app store. Use it on here on awesemo.com as well. All part of, again, the Awesemo Plus, $29.95. You can't beat that. And you also, it's very difficult to beat the books. It's not that difficult when you have NHA working for you. So I can't give a better explanation of how to work it than me using it on my day-to-day life as far as work and here, of course, on Awesemo. Is there a better comedic duo? Not TV. We always take TV out of here, Max. It's an easy little slide. It's an easy cop-out to go to TV. We're not talking TV, nor made-for-TV movies. So I don't want to hear like some Armand Asante made-for-TV movie and whoever his co-host was. But a better comedic duo all-time in film than Pryor and Wilder, because they're up there. They're up there. And let me take the easy one out of here. I don't want you guys going top right away. Let me get the easy one out of here. Harrelson and Snipes.
Oh, good one.
Oh,
All
that's
right.
a good one.
That's an easy. See, this is what I'm going to start doing with both of you, since I know you guys know movies exceptionally well, is I'm going to start taking the obvious ones out of here and force you two to think. Look, if you can give me a deeper dive on the red stack tonight, you sure as hell can go deep on comedic duos in film.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, I think like Bad Boys comes to mind with Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. They're pretty good together. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think you did pretty good. Yeah, I mean, Half Baked is really funny, but I can't really put anybody with Chappelle there, right?
No, not a duo, right?
Yeah, right. It's tough. Yeah, maybe like Steve Martin and John Candy.
Now, how many did they have? Did they have enough?
They had the Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yeah.
Didn't they have another one?
I don't think he wasn't in Stripes, right? No.
No,
Andy
it was
wasn't.
Bill Murray was in Stripes.
Yeah, no, but it was with Bill Murray.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. The comedic duo thing is tough for sure.
What about Riggs and Murtaugh?
Oh,
Richard
yeah.
Weber.
Yeah, Glover and
Yep.
I think that's an action movie, though.
I'm thinking Will Ferrell and John C. Riley. They had a
That's
couple
not
together.
bad, man.
Oh, yeah,
The
that's
last
good.
one sucked. That Sherlock Holmes one sucked, but I think they cranked out one or two good ones. So I'll take that one.
Ooh.
Yeah, the Wedding Crashers guys are pretty good, too. They have a couple together. Yeah.
Yeah. Owen Wilson's
Owen
tough for me.
Yeah, he's whatever.
I just keep
And I mean,
thinking.
you could throw it way back, and we could say like Abbott and Costello. I don't know how far back you want to go, but
That's
those guys
why
had
I say
they were
all time,
usual.
Terry. If you want to date yourself, go ahead.
So yeah, then my list is the Marx Brothers, Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah, Marx Brothers, they cheat though because there are too many of them. So
Yeah, that's fair.
you
Yeah,
can't
that's
narrow
true.
it down.
Well,
All right, let's look behind the plate. All right, let's
Karl
start
Marx
here.
wasn't very funny.
Who's that?
Karl Marx was not very
No,
funny.
no, he was the fifth of the Marx Brothers. He was the straight guy. All right, let's start, Max. Are you paying up for any catcher? We talked about Houston. We talked about stacking Houston, and especially with the lower ownership, doesn't really look like that might be the place to go as far as behind the plate. So how do you approach the catcher position tonight individually?
Yeah, it's tough. I don't think this is a spot you pay up for. Like, catcher for me is I just take whoever's in my stack. Just because they all project so similarly that, I mean, usually there's like a cheap guy in my stack. And if I think my stack's going to go off, then he's going to get, 4 or 5 at-bats. And I'm just be like, all right, maybe I'll just lock in those points. So with Terry's point, like the Houston catchers are so cheap. I'll probably play those guys. And then like Reese McGuire at 2.3K for the Blue Jays. He's not very good, but he's part of that stack that I really like. He's at Fenway. Maybe he hits one over the monster. Maybe it's one towards the pesky pole. Who knows? So those are the types of guys that I'm going to play today. That's kind of like my salary saver spot.
Yeah, you approach that same way, kind of, Terry, where if you're going to save some money, it's going to be behind the plate tonight.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. But kind of like Max said, I'm typically taking these guys along with a stack. So it depends on which teams I'm stacking, which guys are available within those. Looking at the best way for me to look at this is via my home run model. And I get 2 catchers from the same team popping up with basically double the home run mark in my model as every other catcher, which is kind of interesting. It's Yerman Mercedes and Yasmani Grandal. I think both of those guys are in play. They're not that expensive. I was getting some solid power numbers on the White Sox stack. I know Max likes Tariq Skubal, and I agree with everything he said, but I'm also getting decent numbers coming back the other way. So if I was looking to one off a catcher, since both of those guys are cheap, that might be where I look. And I don't think they're drawing too much ownership. So looking at it through that perspective, that would probably be where I look. And then maybe I would include like a guy like Sal Perez or maybe Omar Narvaez that Max mentioned from the Milwaukee stack there. Those are my leading candidates. As a low-own kind of a dart throw, maybe you get to Eric Haas and all his tremendous power, but it's a tricky spot like we were saying about going up against Giolito. So I don't know that I love that. So that's kind of how I look at this when we talk position by position. But for a slate this size, it's really important for us to ram home. You guys want to be stacking. You guys want to be building full stacks out there. You don't want to be putting together combinations of catcher from this team, first baseman from that team, second baseman from another team, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all about the stacks here.
Right. So essentially, we're basically looking for where the stack might have a hole or two, a one-off that justifies, especially if you're paying high, like Houston, for example, and Max laid it out, the 5K guys across the board for Houston. So you're going to try and find cheaper one-offs, or maybe just as you can look at Houston's catcher alone. I don't know if that would be the angle there. But looking at just across the board now, kind of moving to first base, Max, and knowing, of course, that stacks are in play for a couple of teams that we spoke about. Toronto, you mentioned you really like that stack. Let's say you're stacking another squad. Is Guerrero a guy you're going to get to simply because he was part of another stack you had?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely the highest projected guy. So yeah, I mean, usually if I'm stacking, the first baseman's in there just because that's a power position. So like if I'm playing Houston, I'm probably going to get Yuli just because he's such a big part of that lineup and he's only 4.5K. I think that's underpriced. But that said, I think 5.2K is way too cheap for Vladdy as well. And I love the spot here for him. So yeah, those are probably the top two guys for me. I always love playing Matty Olson just because the guy has such tremendous power and he's kind of like that true three outcome guy where it's either strikeout, a walk, or a home run. So two of those outcomes I really like. So those are the types of guys I usually play. And, Terry mentioned that the White Sox really project really well for home runs. That's because Skubal is a very polarizing pitcher where he gives up a ton of hard contact, also a really nice strikeout rate, which is why he's only in the 6Ks. So Jose Abreu also makes a ton of sense here.
First base, anybody that jumps out maybe again on a one-off scenario if you were so inclined to not stack that position?
Me?
Yeah, Terry, sorry.
Sorry. I was not.
I know you were waiting to drop your next comedic duo. I'm sorry.
That's all I'm thinking about. Yeah, I will echo what Max said about Olsen. I think he's at a price point on DK where there's just no ownership going there. And it's not the toughest matchup in the world going up against Brady Singer. Kid's a decent pitcher sometime in the future, probably, but he's not really there yet. 23.2% strikeout rate, 1.46 whip is exploitable. So yeah, I can definitely get to some shares of Olsen there. And the hit tool for him is actually, Max was saying, 3 true outcomes, and that's very true, but the hit tool's actually been there a little bit. He's 277, 365, 568 this year, 291 ISO, creating runs 57% better than average. Love Matt Olsen. I'll throw Cody Bellinger into the mix too. He's at the top of my board in terms of home runs, over second overall on the slate to Yordan Alvarez. He was my home run pick for the day. I'll spoil it, but we've got decent salary. He's relatively affordable for being Cody Bellinger, getting a solid matchup, solid home run marks. So I think the Dodgers are in a bit of a sneaky spot there where maybe not enough people are getting to them going up against Mike Foltynewicz. Folty was a guy that I was targeting every single time he pitched for the first part of the season. Then he went like 3 games without giving up any home runs, but then he's given up some he's given up 1 each in his last 2 games, only went 3 2/3 the last time out. He's still a targetable pitcher. So I want to grab some Dodgers bats if I can get them in low-owned combinations, which it looks like we can. Bellinger is the highest-owned Dodger, but you can offset that with some of these other guys pretty easily.
All right, moving around the bag here. Second baseman, Max, that jump out that maybe aren't right there at the top. Again, Altuve, Muncy, the guys that are going to be worked in stacks depending on who you're looking at. So I imagine it's going to be the same scenario, right, across the board when you have a guy that you can roster like Altuve in a ridiculously projected stack. But as you start to go a little lower or maybe lesser cost on guys, is there anyone from a one-off standpoint that jumps out here?
See, like I never play Altuve. I'll just kind of say that. And sometimes it hurts me when he hits those 360-foot home runs. But the guy just doesn't have enough power and doesn't steal as much as he used to. And he's always like 5,600. So like I'm not paying for his 15% strikeout rate and his 9% walk rate. Like he has a 454 X slugging. Okay, it's fine. But it's like I can get that at a cheaper price at a second base spot that like I just never play a 5.4K Altuve. So I'm probably actually going to avoid him from that stack, and there'll be somewhere that I save money. I also never play Marcus Semien, kind of the same vein, where he's a really good hitter, but he's not a power hitter. So second base is where I kind of try and find guys that hit for power, but are also pretty cheap. Jonathan India has been hitting really well lately, and he's in that Cincy team in that really tiny park, only 4,200, and he's going to be leading off there. So I like a guy like him. And I was going to mention Minnesota today just because they're also in that really, really good weather spot where it's almost 90 degrees and pretty much unlivable conditions in Minnesota. It's either like 20 degrees and ice or it's 90 degrees and scorching hot. So he gets to live there, unfortunately for him. But I also like stacking Minnesota today, and I like Polanco there at the second base spot, only 4K. And then, there's always like 2K guys that pop up, guys in the 2K, 3K price range that I'm going to take some shots at. I'm not sure who that is right now. Maybe like a Shed Long or something if he's in the lineup. Yeah. So that's second base is usually a position that I try to avoid in my stacks and just try and save some salary.
Yeah, speaking of Long, I mean, he's popping up a lot on the Fantasy Cruncher as lineups are coming in, Terry. Are you looking at somebody maybe outside of the obvious at second base tonight?
Taking a look, I think we might get a little juice to squeeze out of Enrique Hernandez still, leading off for that Red Sox team going up against Ross Stripling. I don't think it's a crazy high-end spot for facing Stripling, so there's nothing we really have to worry about with that Red Sox team that's been so good. Hernandez is actually below average, believe it or not, in creating runs, 12% below average, hitting at the top of that Red Sox lineup, which is just kind of absurd given the guys that hit behind him. But he's only got a 239, 295, 397 triple slash so far this season, over 200 at-bats. That's got people off of him. He's super cheap, 2,200. He's a guy who is capable of hitting one over the wall. He's my highest home run model mark for a second baseman on the slate. So I'll take him. I don't love it. I don't love the player. I avoid him on a lot of slates, both when he was with the Dodgers and now with the Red Sox. But I think at that price, particularly if you're building some Red Sox stacks or if you need a cheap one-off second baseman with a little bit of pop, I think he fits that bill fairly well.
All right, Max, as we move now to third base here and kind of looking similarly to how we presented everything with stacks in the backdrop. I don't know, again, how you're approaching it outside of the stack and just kind of looking at Cleveland, for example, kind of right there at the bottom of the top tier of stack value. Ramirez leading off. I don't know if that's a one-off now that becomes interesting. Your boy Devers, who I thought was going to hit a home run, and we'll talk about home runs coming up. But, you start to look at maybe some one-offs of stacks that you haven't been heavy on. Where does third base kind of jump out at you?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm stacking, it's probably Bregman in my Astro stack just because he's so good. But other guys I really like are Eugenio Suarez. I always like to take him against guys that don't strike anybody out, which is a Kyle Freeland. Again, in that really small park in Cincinnati. Really like him. I think he's underpriced. And I love Kyle Seager in this spot. I know we were talking about the Mariners, that they make for probably a chalky pay down stack, but Kyle Seager's numbers this year are a little ridiculous. He's slugging like his X slugging is like almost 600, like 570 or something. It's insane. Savali also doesn't strike anybody out. So I love Kyle Seager. Here's only 3.5K. So those are going to be the guys I'm going to be getting to a little bit. And then I always love playing guys like Ryan McMahon. You can play him at second or third, and he's going to be against a really, really chalky playing the
Molly.
Where is he today? Molly, exactly. Against a chalky Molly, again in that really small park. For some reason, he's always priced up, even like in bad matchups, but that's probably because of he's so good at Coors. But he also has really good X slugging numbers, also really good launch angle and barrel numbers. So 5K, if you have the salary to pay up, I don't mind playing him against a chalky pitcher and getting some leverage.
How are you approaching it? Are you going to look to pay up maybe for a one-off here, Terry, assuming that this position is not in a stack, or maybe looking a little deeper for a lower cost option?
Yeah, so it'll probably be, if I'm one-offing it, it might be a spot where I'm paying up to get to the one-off and grabbing a guy like Devers, who's second ranked in my home run model behind Bregman at third base, and just is one of the better pure power hitters in the league and just drives the ball like crazy. He's a league leader in doubles. There's a lot to like about Rafael Devers. I don't know if you guys saw the piece on The Ringer about the top 25 baseball players under 25, but he was not ranked high enough, and he was ranked like 6th or 7th. They had Brian Hayes over him, which is just bonkers. So he's one of my favorite bats in the league. I wish he wasn't on the Red Sox when I say that, but yeah, some of him. I can get to some of Justin Turner as either a one-off or in those Dodgers stacks that I mentioned. And then John Moncada gets the same boost in the home run model for facing Tariq Skubal as those other White Sox we talk about. So he would be in play there. And I wouldn't totally sleep on the at least on the FanDuel slate, where you can get Bobby Dahlbeck at third base as well. If he's in the lineup, power bat from the end of the lineup who's never owned and is super, super cheap. So he's an option for me if you're looking for a cheap one-off at the position.
All right, Tatis going up against the Beast, right? And DeGrom We already talked. I mean, the over/under on Odd Shopper for DeGrom's case tonight is 9.5. Now, since he's been back from injury, he's only eclipsed that number, like hit double digits once, and that was the 11K start that he's had. So keep that in mind. While he may dominate, doesn't mean he's going to get to 10Ks tonight. In fact, you're going to get good odds value, at least on the under. But with that said, I mean, again, looking at stacking, looking at the lineups kind of in the backdrop, Max, is Tatis even worth paying up knowing who he's going up against?
Yeah, he's not. I mean, you're going to get a good leverage on him, but it's just like DeGrom is just so good. The only thing about DeGrom, like we didn't mention, is he's only thrown 85 pitches as his max. And he got 11 strikeouts on 85 pitches somehow. This is ungodly. Like, nobody does this. So if for some reason they're ramping him up and they're going to let him throw 100 pitches, there's no way you would be paying for Tatis in this spot. Timmy Anderson makes sense, I think. Again, another home run spot here, also steal some bases. Yeah, I mean, Carlos Correa is probably going to be my highest owned guy if I'm paying up at 5.2K. Yeah, it's not a spot where I really want to pay down too much. There's just not that many guys under like 4K. I want to mention Willy Adames just because he's one of my favorite players right now. Every time I look, he's barreling up the ball. So he's another one of those guys that's kind of like a 3 outcome guy, which I love to roster. Only 4,100 in this spot.
Yeah, a lot of 5K plus guys here on DK at this position, Terry. So I'm not sure how you approach it, knowing that we're looking at more like the one-off as opposed to incorporating somebody in the stack.
Yeah, for me, it'd be most likely to come into a stack. But that said, we do have shortstops basically a premium hitting position these days, much more so than it was back in the old days of baseball anyway. So there are very good bats here. Max hit on most of them, but I would throw Xander Bogaerts into that mix. I would even throw some Francisco Lindor shares into that mix just in terms of a quality player. I don't love the matchup going up against Snell on the other side of that Mets Pods game. That's probably going to just end up being a stay away spot for me in terms of bats. Totally agree with what Max said about Fernando Tatis. One of the bigger strikeout bats on that team. If we're looking at strikeout rate for the second highest, 26.4% for the season. The active roster, or excuse me, the confirmed lineup for the Padres striking out just 21.5% of the time against everybody this year. And they sit second best in baseball with just a 21.4% rate against righties. So it's not the easiest spot in the world for DeGrom in terms of the strikeout upside. So I might be with that under and not expect just gargantuan number of strikeouts from DeGrom, but I do think he's just so uber talented that it's not worth rostering Padres here. So, like I said, I would get to some of the power bats and the high end shortstops from some other teams. Eugenio Suarez from the Cincinnati Reds that I wrote up. Even if you wanted to throw Trey Turner back and grab some low on Washington stacks going up against DeSclafani, who I do have some grudging respect for. I think that's a fine spot. Trey Turner, one of the best shortstops in the league in terms of his power and his speed upside. So really like that. I would throw Gavin Lux into the mix if I'm getting the Dodgers stacks. There's a lot to do with this position.
All right, before you each give me and the world 3 non-stacked outfielders and a home run pick as well, 2 duos that I'm really surprised were not mentioned, and I'm disappointed in both of you. Cheech and Chong. I mean, what the hell's going on with either one of you here?
Yeah.
That's a
Cheech
good one.
and Chong.
That
really?
should have been.
It's a good one.
That should have been right off the top.
You could be stone sober, and you still have to appreciate their work, right?
They're very funny.
And the other one, because they've had somewhat of a run and almost like a mini comedic empire, what about Jay and Silent Bob?
Sure.
Yeah, but like, I don't know. Silent Bob is a very small part of that for me. Like, I always love Brody from Mallrats, like, who plays him, Jason Lee?
Yeah, Jason Lee's great.
Yeah,
I didn't know who to match
Jason
Lee
Lee's
up with.
So good. And then the guys from the leading guys from the original Clerks. So like for me, it would be those guys over Jay and Silent Bob. Like, I never really found Jay's and Silent Bob's antics that funny.
Yeah, I put Kevin Smith as Silent Bob more in that combo just for his silent reactions. He's got reactions, and he doesn't get enough credit for it. But just like the faces and the control that he exerts in that, really, really good. That was also from my hometown where Clerks was filmed. So I'll always ride for Kevin Smith there.
Real quick, I did see this on the chat, and Tyler, who of course is doing a fantastic job as always producing our show, getting us out here for you to see, echoed it. I saw somebody say Cube and Tucker, and I thought, all right, that's a good one. But what about Jackie Chan and Tucker?
Yeah.
Jackie Chan,
We're going
Chris
comedic.
Tucker.
That's the way to go. Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Tucker is very, very good. And
Okay.
Jackie Chan is very underrated as a funny guy.
Comedic we're
As a
only
funny
talking about
guy,
a comedic actor, right?
Yeah.
Like he's great
he
when
was
he has
fun.
to throw somebody through a plate of glass, but he's really funny too in some subtle ways. All right.
Better than Gibson for sure.
Yes. Okay. We've eclipsed Griggs and Murtaugh. I agree with you on that, Max. All right. Start with you, sir, and then we'll go to Terry here. Rapid fire as far. I know you have names aplenty, and they're all involved in a stack or two, but a couple of outfielders that you really like getting to on one-offs.
Castellanos is one. Cody Bellinger is another. And I guess my third guy would be, it's tough, like a JD Martinez. He's only 5K. I think should be higher. He should be more expensive.
Terry?
Love it. Yeah, those are three guys that are all highly ranked in my home run model, highly ranked in my projections, highly ranked in the site's projections. Love those spots. I'll throw highly owned Jordan Alvarez from the top of my home run model into the mix. I mentioned Cody Bellinger's number 2 there. And then I do get a decent swath of Red Sox, so like JD Martinez, but I wouldn't sleep on a cheaper Hunter Renfroe if he's in the lineup. Depends on what we're getting there. And then it's a lot of guys from some of these stacks that we talked about. So like Kyle Tucker in the Astros stack, getting to Mookie, kind of obvious in the Dodgers stack there. AJ Pollock is actually coming up a little bit for me if he's in the lineup today. So that's an interesting one as a super cheap one-off from like later in the lineup. I would maybe consider that. He was kind of coming up. He's a little bit of the oddball there. And then a guy, a superstar in his own right, Christian Yelich from the Brewers is also in that group.
All right. We also forgot Farley and Spade. Good shot. Tall to God there.
Farley and Spade is probably like the first one, actually.
I know. Well, look, this is the beauty of it is I don't put this on the run sheet, right? I put top catchers on the slate on the run sheet. I don't put stuff like this. It's all to catch you off guard. Terry already gave his, but he's going to give it again. Max is going to give his. Maybe it's Devers. I don't think so. But let me take Acuna off the board, plus 290. It's not bad value. So I'm going to roll with a chalk here with a home run pick. But then again, I'm not here to go deep. That's what these two guys are to do. All right, Max, your home run pick.
I guess I'm going Kyle Tucker here. The guy's just a barrel and a bat, and it's too good a spot in 85-degree weather with 60% humidity here.
Love it.
Terry, one more time.
Yeah, one more time, my guy from the second spot on my board behind Jordan Alvarez on that same team that Kyle Tucker is on is Cody Bellinger from the Dodgers. Love the spot, positional flexibility, not a ton of ownership, so I'm all over that. Kyle Tucker ranks 4th on my board. Love the call, Max.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh, Acuna's in the top 12, so also a good call.
Okay. Look, that makes me feel a little bit better. I already placed the wager ahead of time, so I'm locked in either way when it comes to that. Great stuff, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks to you all out there. All we ask is you leave us a like, you subscribe to the channel. That is gigantic. Tyler, another fantastic job as well. Look, the tip-off is coming up next, and if there's ever a reason to stick around beyond the insight and info you're going to get, Kayla is going to give her review, her promised review of what ranch dressing and salsa tastes like together.
Oh,
yes.
God.
Yeah. Look at that face from Max right there. That's what we saw yesterday across the board. So she promised she would eat it and then give us a review today. Okay.
Better her than me.
I'm going to put my nap off so that I can watch that.
That's what I'm doing right away. Don't go anywhere. Tip off. And then we have 2 gigantic NBA shows. I know because I'll be back immediately following the tip off with Adam Scher as we go deeper before lock tonight. Thanks to all of you. Have a great night.